And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and New Jersey's own Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir.
Yeah, I'm actually now kind of settled, which feels extremely weird. And dude, I'm just glad I have my damn backdrop back. I was so sick of that stupid white wall that I had to use last week.
I mean, you used to just be used to me having the fake laminate wood grain.
That was better than what I was dealing with for the past month, all the random backgrounds. But dude, we are so close.
Very close.
I make that statement like once a week on this show, but we're really in striking distance here. But am I crazy? Aren't we almost a month away?
Yeah, about coming up on 40 days, like 42, 41, 42 days, if I'm not mistaken. So, look, very close to the season, and I think maybe week 0 might even be a little bit sooner.
24th, August 24th.
August 24th. So, yeah, about 30 days, 30 from week 0. So, a lot to get into.
No one's talking about that, but sorry.
But it's funny you say that nobody's talking about it. You know what else no one's really talking about nationally?
Don't know what you're talking about. I don't think it's important.
Oh, it's interesting. How about Marcus Freeman getting shoved in the locker by Brian Kelly not once but twice?
Okay, this is what I'm going to say to you. But you knew that everybody and their mother knew that the kid wasn't going to Notre Dame. Everybody knew that the kid wasn't going to Notre Dame. Any receiver who's competing with LSU, everybody knows the kid's going to go to LSU. I wasn't surprised. I was listening to a recruiting pod that week. They said the same thing. Why would you go anywhere else besides LSU if you're a receiver?
Does it change the fact that, all right, let me ask, because it's me and you, because I'm an LSU fan and you're a Notre Dame guy, I'm an
LSU fan. What are you talking
about? Yeah, okay. I do think the bigger issue will be missed here because you do have LSU and Brian Kelly going against Notre Dame twice and winning, which was what Brian Kelly said when he came to LSU. Listen, I don't feel like we were still aligned there. Joe, you can shake your head all you want to, but facts don't care about your feelings at the current moment. When you
there's other feelings relating about it, like I'm not shocked that LSU pulled recruits.
Okay, but
let me why we keep bringing this up like 3 years removed.
Okay, but no, because this is the first time bona fide head-to-head that they've gone after a recruit, and they went after 2 of them. My point is that I still saw yesterday Notre Dame fans going after Brian Kelly. And Joe, if this were anybody else, what would we say? Hey, maybe Brian Kelly had a point. But because Notre Dame fans don't want to relent that, it's like I'm having a conversation with a wall. I can't have an honest conversation with a Notre Dame fan.
You're having an honest conversation with me right now. We already dove head first into this segment. So can you provide the context of, I think it'd be a waste of momentum if we try to do this after the break.
No, you just don't want to do it.
We're talking about it.
Obviously, it's about Brian Kelly and LSU being on a heater in recruiting. So look, Brian Kelly has gotten a lot of flack over the years for not being a good recruiter. You know, the viral videos about him not being a good recruiter at Notre Dame. Over the last week, they've gotten 3 of the 4 high-profile guys that they got. They got 3 out of 4 top 50 prospects trending towards a number 1 class in the country after landing guys like Bryce Underwood, Harlem Berry, and DJ Pickett, and then getting another 5-star in a 6'6", 205 wide receiver, Derek Meadows. So LSU and Brian Kelly are recruiting at a very high pace at the current moment. We have been doing, we talked about Kalen DeBoer, Dan Lanning, but, Joe, there is a question. I don't see Twitter overreacting the way that they did for DeBoer and Lanning. Brian Kelly doesn't get that love. And, it is what it is. People say I'm a homer. Joe, he's not getting the love that he deserves for what they've been doing the last month.
Look, I will give him his flowers. I mean, it's an accomplishment, and he's had 2 previously good recruiting classes before that, especially his first one that he stepped in going into his first season. He pulled off Harold Perkins, which is a huge deal that we've seen the dividends that have been paid. But I think that there's a very clear reason why he's not going to get the same love as Kalen DeBoer and as Dan Lanning, because Kalen DeBoer outperformed the expectations because every other fan base, particularly those that are combatants of Alabama, said that he wasn't going to be able to recruit the Southeast because he's never been there. And then for Dan Lanning's case, he is a young coach. He is a very, very young coach. One of the youngest, best coaches in his age range. Actually, he is the best coach in his age range right now in college football. Their accomplishments are different than that of Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly has been around for a very long time. All I'm saying, and I said this at the beginning of the show, I'm not surprised. Like, this is what he was supposed to do when he went to LSU. It's a huge accomplishment and it's great for team building, but I'm not going to come around and be like, whoa, Brian Kelly is the best coach of college football because he pulled these kids. It's expected. He's supposed to be doing this. If Nick Saban did it, would we not be, or Kirby did it, would we not be saying like, he's supposed to?
No, we called Kirby the next Saban. All I am saying is the goalposts tend to be moved here when it comes to him. And okay. And you did it. I want to have a sit-down conversation with somebody who will go with me toe-to-toe and say, look, Joe, Notre Dame has got to wake up on some of the things that they are doing in recruiting. It's the bottom line, bud.
Marcus Freeman is outperforming when Brian Kelly was at Notre Dame in this period of time he is doing better than he is.
So Marcus Freeman better go to a national championship this year. Because if he doesn't, then he won't be doing that. So I'm not talking about Marcus Freeman. I am talking about what did LSU do to be able to go and get the number one player inside your state, and what did they do to get Derek Meadows before you? You are not doing it, and that should be the conversation that Notre Dame fans need to have. It's not about Brian Kelly anymore. It's about program v. program.
Wait, okay, but why is it program v. program?
Because I think if Notre Dame wants to take that next step, I think there are things that they can recruit, and they've been doing a very good job. But, Joe, when you go head-to-head for 2 top 50 prospects and lose, there's got to be an underlying thing of changing things. Not Marcus Freeman. You got to change it from the top. Joe, newsflash, the days have changed of what recruiting is. You got to be out there with your collective. You got to be out there in the IL.
Find me the recruiting classes that Brian Kelly had when he was at Notre Dame that are up to par with the last 2 that Marcus Freeman just put together.
The Monte Teo class, when he first got there, was the number 1 class in the country.
I don't think they weren't the number 1. They were one of the best, but they weren't
the number 1 class in the country. You can go look.
They also have never had a quarterback back-to-back, actually, with CJ Carr and with Deuce Knight, back-to-back quarterback commits of the caliber that they had since Jimmy Clausen.
Who are they going to throw it to?
They have recruited at a higher level at receiver than you're.
Oh, you have 1 3-star kid committed.
It's July.
Okay.
It's July right now.
Can I give you an interesting stat that no one likes to talk about? Did you know when a kid commits to a school, there's a 95% chance that he stays? 95%.
Okay.
So the likelihood of you getting a kid in July and him staying through is pretty likely.
Look, all I am saying is that I'm trying to pull up the highest rated Notre Dame recruiting classes because I would like to know off the top of my head, or I would like to know and have that in front of me. I don't know if anyone's ever done put that together before, but all I am trying to make perfectly clear here is that sure, we can make that same statement that you love to make that Notre Dame isn't doing good enough in recruiting when right now Marcus Freeman is producing at a higher clip than those that were at Notre Dame before him. In the past 2 decades.
He's not, Joe.
Yes,
no,
he is. The caliber of guys that he is bringing into Notre Dame is at a very, very high level.
Okay.
The 2024 class in this upcoming class.
And none of that matters if you're not going to get the premier guys that get you over the hump. Are you worried about – see, this is the question that I ask Notre Dame fans. Are you worried about what your current coach did to the coaches that came beyond them, or are you looking to the future and saying, hey, Derek Meadows, Damian Shanklin are the 2 kids that don't take you to a playoff. We've seen you get to a playoff. The truth is, Joe, we know that you can get to a playoff. What everybody keeps saying about them is that they don't have the dudes that set them apart from everybody else. When you miss in recruiting
this is where I get really annoyed at this. You act like that they're recruiting at a G5 level. They are not. They're at the Big 12 level.
Just said that you are recruiting at a playoff level. However, what do you want Notre Dame for? Like, you want Notre Dame to win a national title, do you not?
Michigan just won a national title. No, wait. Michigan just won a national title without producing and having to have the best recruiting class in the country. They didn't have to pull 4 or 5 stars.
Okay.
If Brian Kelly doesn't win a national championship with these kids, that's going to be more of an indictment.
Of the one national champion out of the last 20 national champions.
Who did they play in the national championship? Washington. Where have they been in the recruiting?
National title winners.
Unless you're Georgia, you don't need to be the top team.
Alabama, LSU, Ohio State. Joe, do you know there's 130 programs in FBS football? Only 6 of them have been the number 1 in the college football playoff rankings ever. You know why those teams continue to repeat? If you look at them, historically, all of them are recruiting at an elite level. What does Notre Dame want? A national championship. And when you miss on those caliber of kids, you're not going to take the next step that you want. Oh, but he's doing
the point is, though, is that you don't have to be in the top 3 of recruiting to win a national title. As long as you're within the top 12, 10, in that range, as long as you're producing 4-star kids and a few 5 stars every single recruiting cycle, you're going to be completely fine. Notre Dame is not in a position where they're recruiting like Liberty right now.
You're missing the point that I'm saying.
I'm not. I am understanding your point.
Okay, and let me tell you this. You're not winning a national championship until you get a couple of those kids.
Michigan didn't need them. You know what Michigan did to win a national title? They brought their kids back, and they used NIL and to incentivize them to do so. And Notre Dame can do that too.
You're using one. What did Georgia? What did Alabama? What does Ohio State do? So I have 3. What does LSU do? There are 3 other programs that I can say are doing the complete opposite too.
I'm using Michigan as an example because they're the only school that can be used as an example of a similar academic prestige. Notre Dame can't be used as a parallel for Georgia, LSU, Alabama, because they don't go after the same types of kids. Notre Dame has an academic.
Went after the same kids. That's why Brian Kelly pushed Marcus Freeman in the locker. What are you talking about? They don't go
at Notre Dame out for 2 prospects. That's great. But for some reason, I just don't understand.
LSU.
I don't understand why this segment is the way that it is. The segment should be great.
All I'm saying
LSU got top kids. Why are you making it seem like Notre Dame is like an inept, unrecruitable program? That's the way that you're framing it.
Did the words come out of my mouth?
That's the tone that
Notre Dame is recruiting like a playoff team. Yes, those words came out of my mouth. You know why? You know why I changed this segment the way that it is? Let me tell you why I do it. Because every single day of my godforsaken life, I have to see dudes, which I'm kind of starting to like him now, your boy from Always Irish, who constantly talks about Brian Kelly. And then meanwhile, I sit
there. They're losers. I don't do that.
Meanwhile, I had to sit there, and when the moment comes, all I am saying is, in my experience, until you get those type of kids, you're not going to get where you want to be, and that's a national title. Being a winner.
No, Brian Kelly, the team that he took Notre Dame in his 3rd year, by the way, to the national title, was a Mickey Mouse team. They didn't belong there. We all knew that they didn't belong there. So we also, first of all, need to act like that his level of recruiting early on at Notre Dame was not at some like unprecedented level. It was not. It's on par with what Marcus Freeman's doing right now.
Monte Te'o sucked.
He didn't do anything in the NFL. Oh, but yeah, okay. I'm not going to be that negative. I'm not going to be that negative. I'm not going to be that negative. He was a fantastic player at Notre Dame. Okay. But they didn't belong in that national championship game. We all know that they didn't.
I just wish that somebody at Notre Dame would get their head out of their ass and form a collective and start pushing. That's all I'm saying. That has nothing to do with academic prestige.
First of all, they do have NIL. And second of all,
okay,
they're able to do what Michigan did. I'm telling you right now, they can do exactly what Michigan did.
Yeah, y'all do. Yeah, y'all do. LSU said what's up. All right.
When those kids hop in the portal, we'll talk. We'll have the same we'll revisit this conversation.
I didn't say nothing about portal. Not the only topic that we'll talk about here tonight. Joe, we continue on our deep dives. We're getting to the big boys here. Tonight we land on Georgia and Texas.
Yes, decided that we should go with 2 bangers. We passed SEC Media Day. We kind of have to round the corner here. As I said in the open, the season's not that far away. We got to wrap up some of these previews. So we're getting to the heavy hitters. I'm thinking maybe tomorrow. Should we do Notre Dame LSU? Are we ready for that? Are you and I ready for that?
Sure.
Okay.
We can do that tomorrow.
Okay.
All right. Look, 2 teams that everybody, at least at SEC Media Days, believed are going to at least be playoff teams, but 2 teams that might rematch in the SEC championship game after they play early in the season. Joe, this one's going to be a fun one. So stick around. We'll talk about the Georgia Bulldogs first. We'll break down what some people believe as the national champion this upcoming year, and Texas entering the SEC for the first time. We'll break them down as well. Joe, let's waste no time here. Let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. Guys, props, early season bets. Who do you think is going to win Heisman? Joe, by the way, did you see, speaking of Notre Dame, Riley Leonard's odds did go up this week on potentially winning the Heisman. Marcus Freeman fire odds also went up as well. Nevertheless, go to our good friends over at BetOnline whenever for all your betting needs. Let's talk about them now. We'll come back, break down Georgia next. Stay with us. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. I wish that we were doing Texas, because that would be a great segue, I guess, after the second breakout.
We didn't think of that. We did
not think about that. Joe, we continue on our deep dives tonight. We are going to stay in the SEC. Talk about them Georgia Bulldogs. Joe, everybody believes that Georgia is going to be, or potentially can be, the national champion at SEC Media Days. Everybody picked them, or I say everybody, but majority of people picked them to be the champion. They return a lot. They add a lot of really big pieces, in my opinion. I think that defense is going to be just as good as it's ever been. Joe, I got to admit, I said it last week after we got back from New York. I'm finding a very hard time not picking the Georgia Bulldogs early to be my national champion. But we do play a season. What are your thoughts on Kirby going into year 9?
Yeah, I'm sure that we're going to do a segment that's going to, or not, I'm sure we will do a segment that is going to be our national championship picks, our playoff predictions. All of that is probably going to be last 2 weeks leading up to the season. Georgia's going to be my pick. I don't think that there's any point to overthink this. I picked them last year. If it wasn't for some injuries late in Alabama surging when they did, they probably would have beaten Michigan in the national title game, and they would have gone on to win 3 straight national titles.
I agree.
I look at this team front to back, man, and they improved from last year. They lost a few guys, but they have gotten really significantly stronger the way that they developed through the portal. I don't know if you'll agree with this take, but I think they have the best offensive line in the country. I look at how stout they are. Maybe they can compete with LSU, and it's a close one, but I think that Ernest Green is a budding young star at left tackle who's going to be a great guard in the NFL. Dylan Fairchild's a quality player. Tate Radledge is one of my favorite interior offensive linemen in the country. And then Xavier Truss has just been a experienced veteran for that group that has seen a lot of different roles. Because of how good their offensive line is, knowing that they've got Trevor Etienne, and more importantly, knowing that they have one of the most decisive and best decision-making quarterbacks in Carson Beck, who was able to ascend and rise to the occasion when a number of his key targets in Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey were unavailable. Knowing that he was able to accomplish everything that he did last season makes me feel optimistic that they're going to go on yet another Death Star 13-0 national championship run.
I'll get to that in a minute. Joe, I think that Trevor Etienne might have been the best fit for any player to a school in the country. Because, look, there was something offensively that I did think at times was lacking from Georgia. Now, it's not like their running game wasn't good. They were top 20 in the country in rushing yards per game. They were 20th. But, Joe, you talk about that offensive line for a second. Buddy, now we got to bring in Etienne. And I think that helps a quarterback going into year two like Carson Beck. Yep. Look, I thought Carson Beck was one of the better quarterbacks in the country last year. Didn't probably have the touchdowns that maybe he would want, 24. It didn't matter. The kid was really polished and did some really good things. So offensively, people forget last year they were top 5 in offense. Like, people forget how good they were and then added Colby Young and added Trevor Etienne. Joe, I can't believe I'm leading off a segment talking about Georgia and not mentioning what they've done defensively. You bring in a guy like Colby Young, you have Levitt, you have Dylan Bell. Joe, the receiver core is not that bad. Now, maybe not that premier guy that you would –
to rephrase that, their receiving core is really underrated.
I
could be really good.
Joe, they could be a top 5 offense again. Okay, so you're talking about a team last year, Joe, that lost one game. If I'm not mistaken, aren't they 29-1 in their last 30 games? Yep. 29-1 in their last 30 games. I'm trying to find holes. I don't know from top to bottom if I can find one. Now, run defense has got to be a little bit better, okay, at times. I'm nitpicking. Ultimately nitpicking. Joe, they were 18th in the country in rushing yards allowed last season. I think people, when they think about Kirby, they think about Georgia, they want to look defense, D-line, front 7. No, sir. You better start looking at this offense and how good they can be. Second year under Bobo with Carson Beck. Joe, let me ask you like this, because we'll get to defense in just a moment, but Joe, do they have holes offensively? And if they do, where is it?
Well, so this is kind of what I've come together with. I think this is the best offensive unit that Kirby has ever had. I think better than any of the Jake Fromm teams. I think better than any of the Stetson Bennett teams. I know that there were instances where there were premier athletes at a number of positions, like Amarius Mims and Brock Bowers, who were part of last year's team. But this one,
Joe, they also had A.D. Mitchell. If he doesn't hit the portal, then what? So
this feels like one of the most balanced offenses that they've had. And I think that because of that balance and that depth, it elevates their level of play. And more importantly, it all comes down to that offensive line that I mentioned, where I feel like they're going to be so good and so consistent with limiting the amount of pressures and the amount of penetration that they see on every given snap. They're going to have an easy time running the ball. They're going to have an easy time passing the ball. And it feels even crazier to make this statement because you pointed out they were a top 5 offense last year. How much better can you actually get? I don't know if they'll ever ascend to being that number 1 offense because there's other teams out there that are just a little bit more beat you over the top and splash play. Like Ohio State's going to probably fit that category more. Oregon's probably going to fit that category more. But their steadiness and their consistency is what is going to help them win a national title. Their offense just needs to be strong because we know that their identity is always going to be on defense.
So you bring up an interesting point. If there is, I don't want to say a weakness, but something that I question, Joe, do they have the explosiveness on the outside? Like, do they have somebody that can take the top off the defense and they go long to? Ladd McConkey, people didn't realize how fast he was or good he was. Goes to compound. What was it, like a 4.34 or 4.44 or something?
He was fast. I think it was a 4.3 kid. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, 4.3 kid. People were like, "Hey, Miss Mahonky kid can run." That would be the question that I have about explosiveness. Obviously, Brock Bowers not being there. I think they're going to find somebody. I don't know who it is. Maybe it's Colby Young, right? Like we talked about Miami a while back, and maybe Kobe Young, I know, is a possession guy, but
yeah, he's more of a big body type of a dude.
Dude separated a lot of times on film, though. And that's the big question for me. I mean, and look, he got Tyler Van Dyke throwing to him too. Now, you got Dominic Lovett, who's coming into a second year here, who could potentially be that guy. I just think all around they are the most balanced offense from top to bottom that that's going to be there. Joe, moving over to them defensively. Yep. Hot take. Best D-line in the country.
I'm trying to think who else might. Okay, wait. There's only one team that I would push back. That is even
push back.
Ohio State. I think Ohio State's is better.
And
I could argue that Michigan's is a little bit better.
I had this same debate that you did. However, I'm just not so sure. I said D-line. Joe, all those 5 stars that didn't play last year? They're sophomores now.
That's true.
And they got 3 of them.
There's guys that we didn't even get to see. So it's a very good point.
Guys that we didn't get to see. And you bring back Mikael Williams. Joe, yeah. I was watching a lot of Georgia stuff. They defensively in the run game, they bring back Stackhouse. They bring back Brinson.
Fine. I think Stackhouse is he's just kind of a space heater, which is to his role. He's not Jalen Carter though. This is
fair.
Jordan Davis.
Fair. I will remind people how big he got down the stretch though. I mean, down the stretch. I mean, my man could be an unmovable force at times too.
So let me elaborate on the point that you're making. I think at this given point in time, we have to give that nod to Ohio State because they're bringing back production that we've seen. But I could totally see by like week 8, we're not saying that Georgia's defensive line is the best in the country. And it is for the fact of,
especially if they run through Texas, and we'll talk about them in a minute.
Yeah.
So Texas has got to find a running game.
I also think that's going to be important to talk about. But I also think that a lot of their potential performance on their defensive line, which has always been the identity for the defense in general, it's just been big, mauling, 5-star guys, freakish athletes. It all kind of comes down to what happens with Mikael Williams. There is a very large variance from the NFL draft community on where he's going to go. Some people think that he is the best prospect, better than James Pierce Jr. Some people think that he is unactualized and he's going to be an early second-round pick. There is a very wide range of debate. And I think that if he does take that step forward of producing more, last year he didn't really produce. He was kind of stayed stagnant from that freshman season. Such a gifted
and
player.
We were very big on him. Very big on him. Him and Harold Perkins, ironically, had the season where people were like, yeah, I mean, they're freakish athletes. They just didn't have the production. And I'm like, yeah, but they're still freaks of nature, and I'm like, okay. So your point is fair. I would concede fair. I still think that they're going to have the best because like when you go down depth piece, 5-star, 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 and I'm like, God damn. I mean, Joe, it doesn't stop. And then now you're getting into year 2 of these 5-star kids. And I'm like, yeah, who are these? Who's going to be the kid that I, just don't know about, that I'm not on the beat every day, so I'm not following this team religiously? Who's going to be the kid that is going to be the next superstar on that defensive line? Because you can only recruit that position so long and so well for there not to be somebody along this defensive line that just busts out and we're like, oh, shit, here he comes. And of course, here comes one. Kirby just plants these kids on trees. And so go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and the other thing, too, that like to provide context for the non-Georgia fans that are watching this segment or tuning in today that are like, oh, how good can this group be? 2023, they had a historic defensive line class that if it wasn't for the existence of that Texas A&M class from the year prior, 2 years prior, whenever that was,
would have been probably the best class of all time statistically.
So yeah, like potentially up there.
Beat off the D line there because there's like somewhere up top.
These are 2 5-stars: Damon Wilson, Jordan Hall. Jordan Hall is like a dude. I watched his high school tape. That kid can freaking move, and he didn't get on the field. Gabe Harris was a 4-star. Samuel Mpemba, who is from St. Louis, Missouri, he was a high 4-star. There's a ton of linebackers, including C.J. Allen, who was so important. And we didn't even see Raylan Wilson get on the field, who was a 5-star linebacker. A.J. Harris is also a kid who is supposed to have a pretty prominent. Oh, no, way he transferred. A.J. Harris transferred to Penn State. I completely forgot about that. I'm mixing up who there's a damn kid in the 2024 class that's supposed to. My point is that grouping of 2023 kids that you brought up, those are all the names that we're going to be talking about.
We will see. So look, let me ask you this. To add on to this, Carson Beck has been, and unironically, I don't think people are talking enough about Carson Beck coming into the season. Mm-hmm. Am I crazy to think he's one of, like, people, maybe I'm wrong here. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, if not the best quarterback in the country. Am I seeing something wrong here? Like,
no.
Why is there not more chatter about Carson Beck? I know that there's some, but Joe, I mean, this kid's going into year 2. We saw a lot of the things that he did. I mean, he's going to be a big-time playmaker for them, obviously the most important position.
So, by the way, it was Ellis Robinson who's supposed to be a big deal for them. I think that, as we kind of always do in the preseason, we get caught up in the hype of, first of all, the existence of Shedeur Sanders has altered the conversation. That's a separate convo. I think that the traitsiness of a guy we're going to talk about in a second, of like a Quinn Ewers, of a Cam Ward, of Jackson Dart, those types of guys that have the tools but are maybe still developing, have really pushed down the convo on Carson Beck. But what we forget is that last year, there were a number of instances where things weren't going well and the offense was sputtering. Brock Bowers was out. Ladd McConkey was out. You were down to your 4th running back. The dude named Cash.
Guys like Dylan Bell were having to step up, right?
Who's the white running back that they have, last name Cash? What the heck is his name?
Oh, yeah, I forget. But
they were thin, though. And
yeah,
despite all of this,
they had a damn lot of injuries last year and still went undefeated.
There are plenty of other college quarterbacks on championship caliber teams in the recent past, that if they had the same level of injuries, would have folded. Like, really would have really struggled. And we would have just been shaking our head saying that that's such a disappointment. He didn't do that. He kept the ship afloat. That to me is where I am so optimistic, because not only are they bringing back more health, but there's more depth at receiver. There's more depth at running back. So we're not going to have those same issues. There's plenty of talent. So if things go awry a little bit, guys get banged up, I want to see what Carson Beck does now that he's got a loaded house supporting him.
Well, and again, like I said in the beginning, you know why I'm so high on Carson Beck? Like, forget the draft prospect stuff, whatever. Yeah. Dude, he might have the best running back in the conference. Like, behind this offensive line and what he's going to be able to spring, Trevor Etienne's going to, at minimum, be a top 3 back in the SEC. So, the running game is going to be something that definitely helps him more than it did a year ago. I'm not saying Milton wasn't bad, or I'm not saying any of that, but this kid is a game changer. Joe, down the stretch, I think his last 3 games, he had double-digit touchdowns. That's insane. Yeah. And so, by the way, that was, just throwing this out there, that was the Florida schedule and that Florida team that he was doing that with. What makes you think that what this kid's going to do behind the Georgia offensive line? So I'm like, oh, dude, they're going to do exactly what they always do. They're going to run the football effectively. They're going to hit the play action on you, and you're going to feel like you got to press yourself if like you're Josh Heupel, and then here comes their defense to lock you down. They put so much pressure on you by how good they are that you get out of your element. Golly, man, I don't know if I'm not going to pick him as my national champion. I'm still waiting to really think about Ohio State here, but God, they're going to be good.
I know we're kind of the kings of glazing Georgia, and I know that that's probably what we're getting labeled as often when we do the show.
Joe,
but
you know what? We're 29-1. We're 29-1 when we pick Georgia.
Like God forbid that we can clearly see what the best team in the country is. Is Ohio State now much closer than they've ever been? Absolutely. Sure. They have narrowed the gap a ton. And the team that they had 2 years ago, that they almost beat Georgia. I think the current team now is better than that Ohio State team from a couple of years ago, the current Ohio State team. There's potential for them to beat Georgia if they faced off with
I
one
don't
another.
know, dog. CJ Stroud. I mean, CJ Stroud or Will Howard?
Well, you know how I would answer that question.
Okay,
because I'm not very excited by Will Howard. I'm obviously picking CJ Stroud, but their defensive line 2 years ago was not nearly as frightening as this upcoming one. I think that it's fair to project and say Ohio State could potentially play Georgia. We don't know what this playoff is going to end up unfolding like, if it will just be a 1 versus 2. But it is impossible to look at this team front to back and not acknowledge that they are built to win a national title. It is reminiscent to every damn national championship winning team that they've had since Kirby took over.
Well, of course, because it was the same team.
Yeah.
We'll see. I'm very high on them. Anything else that we missed that you wanted to get about the Georgia Bulldogs?
No. Actually, last thought. It also kind of helps that they got a pretty light schedule. I feel like that they don't really have, except for Texas and Bama, they got a pretty very winnable schedule. No, even if they had some, sorry, let me rephrase it. If they had some deficiencies, I would still feel pretty confident about them blowing through most of their schedule.
It's definitely tougher than it was a year ago. Okay. But Joe, we're going to talk about Texas in a minute. I mean, that's not an easy road game.
No.
Right. And to be honest with you, there is something that we do need to see from Carson Beck. You know what that is? Win the real big one. Right? Like, we have not seen him.
I got to give him some grace. Because that game was brutal. They step into that game, and I think Amarius Mims went down, and Brock Bowers and Lamakansky were all banged up for that game. Like, there was nothing that he could do in that situation.
Okay. Just remember that when you talk about Jalen Milroe.
What do you mean?
Milroe outplayed him. I mean, he had Tommy Reese.
Did. I'm very high on Jalen Milroe.
I know, but you weren't a year ago.
It's a very different circumstance.
Oh. You said last year J.J. McCarthy had
wait. Okay, we compare two scenarios of two different players in that football game. Who had all of their offensive weapons in their offensive line, and who had a banged up roster? And it was.
I would still say
we watched him sink and like desperately try to paddle to the shore the entire game for Carson Beck. That's what we watched.
I would say that Carson Beck still had a better offensive line last year, without question, and running game.
I disagree with that.
Proctor was not as good as some of these dudes up here. There were weaknesses.
He still had J.C.
McLaughlin, go back to that game. McLaughlin had 3 bad snaps in that game, Joe.
You were trying to convince me that you thought he was pretty good.
Well, I do think he's good. I just don't think he's a center.
Look, all I'm saying is I got to give him a little bit of grace, because we watched that game and it was brutal watching Carson Beck try to do everything.
Sean D in the comments says no excuses. Beck did almost throw 3 picks in that SEC championship game. He's got to win a big one.
All right, fair.
All right. You want to get to Texas, or you want to take a quick break, reset, and then come back and hit Texas?
Yeah, let's hit the break and we'll come back for Texas.
We're right back. We'll talk Texas next. Stay with us.
Ruffino and Joe Show is brought to you by Home Field Apparel, which is the best, without a doubt, premium collegiate apparel brand that is out there. They have over 150 different colleges that you can choose from, whether you're an Illinois fan or a Rutgers fan, maybe you're an LSU fan like Blake, or maybe you're an Alabama fan. Whatever it is, even Idaho, they have so many different designs for so many different football programs that I can guarantee you're going to find some great stuff to help root for your favorite team. I've already gotten my Notre Dame stuff. Blake has his LSU stuff. Make sure you head on over to homefieldapparel.com to check out your team's collection of clothing apparel that they have on the website. And when you do so, when you check out, make sure you use promo code RuffinoJoe to get 15% off your order. That is RUFFINO, Ruffino Joe. Head on over to homefieldapparel.com and get your college gear today.
We're back.
All
I mean, what? You can't do a Texas deep dive and not talk about Sam Ehlinger.
God, that goddamn sound drop. It's just so funny to think of what happened since then.
Well, very. I mean, they still had their head coach flipping off recruits and never mind. Joe, you know what conversation that we're not having this year going into this offseason about Texas is, are they back? Because last year they got to a playoff, and I think it kind of proved to a lot of people that Texas not only have they been recruiting well, that Sark can take them to the playoffs and potentially go into the SEC and win after they went into Alabama last year and upset Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide. We continue on these deep dives. Joe, what are your thoughts on the University of Texas now that they are in the SEC?
I think this is going to be a huge year for Texas. I think that bringing back Quinn Ewers and him not declaring for the draft is going to be huge for them. This Texas offensive line is not far off from the Georgia one. It's not on par, but it's not far off. We talk very highly of Kelvin Banks. We talk very highly of what we think that they can produce. But I have to say, I feel like Texas does feel a tiny bit overhyped. I'm not, before anyone gets pissed at me, I'm not saying that they're going to fall off of a goddamn cliff, okay? But there are two major deficiencies that I have noticed, and I'm sure that you're going to agree with me. They lost Byron Murphy and Devondre Sweat. They tried to replace through the portal, but from what I've read, some of the podcasts I've listened to, it sounds like they're uncertain of what the direction is at their interior defensive line. Yep. At receiver, they're replacing Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell, which was one of the best receiving combos in the country last year. I know that you brought in Isaiah Bond, but that is a question mark. I don't know if outside of Bond, who's the next guy that we're going to. I see a lot of freshmen listed here on this depth chart that I'm looking at on our lads. All I'm saying is that there is a possibility that they start meshing and they hit the ground running, and the best players on this roster that we know how good they are take control. But there's just a lot of uncertainty for me to sit here and commit and say they're going to be playing against Georgia in the SEC championship game. I can't say that with confidence at all.
Oh boy, that's going to be a hot take. I can already see the comments on Twitter or on YouTube now.
I don't care.
I do think it's interesting and a question mark because, look, I think that actions in recruiting, Joe, always speak louder than words ever could. You bring up an interesting point in the interior of their defensive line. Not only just are you replacing two top premier defensive tackles, you're replacing the defensive line coach. You had to go into the portal, okay, and
that's the most important part.
Well, Bo Davis is no longer there, and I know Texas fans feel some type of way about Bo Davis, but if you felt comfortable along the interior defensive line, if you're Steve Sarkisian, you wouldn't have attacked the portal the way that you did. Now, Joe, I think that that's a question mark, okay, because I do think that there are a lot of players that do come into the portal. I do think that they got some good interior defensive tackles in the portal. Yeah, I just don't think that the media's been able to see it, so therefore they're like, oh, we're not going to be that well. We'll wait and see. Joe, that's not the issue that I worry about with them. I've told you and hinted at this for so long now, and now we're here talking about them. Look, is Quinn Ewers going to stay healthy? Okay, and I think
I thought you were going to bring up the secondary. Sorry, continue.
Well, I'm going to hold on. Okay. Just wait just 1 second.
Great.
Okay, Quinn Ewers, can he stay healthy? And Joe, in a conference that is going to get after your ass. Now, I see a lot of Texas fans, especially coming through SEC media days. Joe, it's SEC championship or bust for them. And I'm thinking to myself, look, man, I think that you are a really good team. I do think that you have a lot of talent. But I also question if Quinn Ewers for a third straight year, Joe, does go down or gets banged up. I know that you have Arch Manning. But, Joe, you can't have games like Houston. You can't have games like Kansas. Because I'm telling you, if you do it in this conference, somebody that you have no idea who it's going to be is going to jump up and beat you. That's what happens to teams like LSU. That's what happens to teams like Texas A&M. Oh, well, we have more talent than you. We should beat you. Oh, well, no. Okay, you don't, but you still beat us. How? I question what they're going to do offensively because I don't know how good their running game is going to be. I do agree that their O-line is going to be pretty damn good. I don't know what you have at receiver. I think Isaiah Bond down the stretch was, and I know you hate me saying this, one of the better wide receivers in the country, considering, look, he goes up against Georgia. He has 4 catches in the SEC championship game, all down the stretch to solidify their win against Georgia. It's not like he was going against bad DBs there, okay? He does get a better quarterback in Quinn Ewers and a better play caller in Steve Sarkisian. I think they're ultimately talented. Joe, I just don't know if I could put any faith that they can come in here and get to an SEC championship game. Now, are they talented enough to get there?
Yes.
Yeah, they are. So there comes a part where, Joe, I do have a lot of question marks about Texas. Would it shock me if they're facing Georgia again in an SEC championship game? I'm going to be honest. No, it wouldn't.
No.
But again, am I supposed to believe that Quinn Ewers is going to play all 13 or all 12 regular season games?
Well, so this is what, to piggyback off part of what you said before I get to Quinn Ewers, they have the guts of a team that is capable of going to an SEC championship game. They absolutely do. A returning quarterback, a spark plug running back at CJ Baxter, I think is going to be really good. Trey Moore is a player who was one of the most productive edge rushers in the country at UTSA, and I think is going to step right in and maybe not mimic that production, but be really important for their sack getting as a unit. Where, again, there's just not a lot of certainty because of some of those position groups. I don't think it's a question mark, though, at quarterback. Steve Sarkisian made a really good point, and I agree with Steve Sarkisian where he is saying that it's massive for them that they have this quarterback situation. It's not a controversy, as I jokingly tried to make it at one point during the offseason because we had nothing to talk about. But he has a situation where if Quinn Ewers, who is injury prone, he 1000% is, Arch Manning is the epitome of steady. That was why he was recruited. He was recruited not to be He was recruited not to be the big arm, bomb me over the top like Quinn Ewers. I'm going to kill you 70 yards downfield. That was not what he was recruited to be. He was recruited to be elevate the floor of the offense, dink and dunk, accuracy, more of a Carson Beck type. And I think in his second season, if he had to step in for a game for Quinn Ewers, I would feel very confident about that. If he doesn't perform, that would be a huge disappointment.
You lost me now.
Why? Why? He's going to be a redshirt freshman?
Joe, just because his name is Arch Manning shouldn't stop a true starter or a true quarterback that has seen no action that you have. Hold on, please, dear Lord, that you have no idea what he's going to do. I will remind you that both of his uncles came into the SEC and struggled out of the gate. That's not a Manning trait not to come into the SEC and struggle. Both of them did. So again, God forbid Quinn Ewers goes down before Georgia. God forbid he goes down against a defense like Kentucky. Then what?
Well, first of all, just because his uncles had trouble doesn't mean that he will. We can't
his
uncles
had success doesn't mean that he's going to have success.
But this is why we can't use both of those points to talk about his last name and how it's going to impact his success.
I'm never going to trust a first-time starter ever.
Okay, wait. Serious question here. How much experience did Garrett Nussmeier have before he stepped in that SEC championship game against Georgia? How much experience did he have? 7 games. Overall, 7. Did he ever start a game?
No, but he came in multiple times. He never officially started games. Ed did this stupid thing where he'd run Max out there for the first drive and then give the entire second half or give an entire game to Garrett Nussmeier.
Okay. So he was able to play at a ridiculously high level in the SEC championship game. Like everyone was blown away by how he played in that second half.
Fair.
I don't need Arch to do that. I need Arch to come in if Quinn Ewers goes down against, I don't know, some Texas A&M. Say he goes down and he's got an injury, he can't finish the game. I would feel not 1,000% confident that he's going to win the football game, but I'm not going to feel uneasy. He's no longer a true freshman. He's been there for plenty of time, and he was projected to be this great potential starter. We're not talking about a 3-star.
Into the trap.
I'm not.
Into the trap.
Have you not said on this show that you thought that give him a little time and he wasn't ready as a freshman and now he will be ready eventually?
Yes, but just because me saying that doesn't mean 6, 7, 8 games that he started. Joe, I'm telling you right now.
I'm not asking him to win the Heisman. I'm just asking him to not suck.
No, but you said, but what are we trying to? Could they be 9-3 with Arch Manning? 1,000%.
Yes.
What did we just come off of saying? That they believe that they can be back to where they were a year ago, being a conference champion and a playoff contender, correct?
But he doesn't need to start 12 games. He might have to. Okay. He might not even see the field.
And he might have to, which is what we talked about with Quinn Ewers going back-to-back years of being injured. You cannot have TCU, Houston, and Kansas type of games in this conference. Good luck if you think that you can do that and win.
I think you're doing the inverse. I think that you're accusing me of playing into the Manning name, but you're holding it against him. You're holding it against him that there's all this hype.
No, I am not.
I'm not buying into the superstar hype.
If
I don't think that's
other
him.
Quarterback, goes down in the country. If Carson Beck went down today, or let me not use Carson Beck.
I have a great example. If Dylan Gabriel goes down, I'd feel great about Dante Moore stepping in.
Okay.
If Will Howard goes down, I'd feel really good.
You're not going to feel 1,000% confident that they are what you thought going into the beginning of the season.
Just because I feel really good does not mean that I think said player is going to step in and blow. No, I'm not conceding. I am not conceding. All I am trying to point out is I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Just because I feel really good about a backup quarterback doesn't mean I expect this player to be otherworldly. All I need them to do. Malik Murphy won them a football game against one of the better teams in the Big 12. And it was Kansas State, and he stunk. Malik Murphy stunk in that game.
God's honest truth. With what you know about Kentucky today, I'm throwing them out at random, or Kansas State. You throw a true freshman, a true starter, first-time starter against some of these defenses in this league. All right. Oh, by the way, you brought up Garrett Nussmeier. You want to nitpick that one? Let's go ahead and nitpick it. Had 3 massive turnovers where LSU got within 14 points. If he doesn't have a turnover, they're getting back into the game and they're down 7. So there are moments. Yes, you are correct. Garrett Nussmeier went nuclear, but everybody wants to forget about the first-time real starter mistakes that he made.
I don't need him to be perfect, though. That's what I'm trying to paint here. You don't need him to. You just need him to be a competent starter. You just need him to be.
Let me tell you something that's not competent to move this on. Can I tell you something that's not competent?
Yeah.
Or was not competent a year ago? Their secondary.
I don't understand why you're so down on their secondary. It was a younger group.
Okay, continue.
And they brought in Andrew Makuba from Clemson, who is a very stellar safety. They're going to be better this year.
Okay. Those same guys and that same philosophy that was having busted coverages. Okay. By the way, not all those busted coverages were young guys either.
Did you know that? I didn't even know this. Malik Muhammad is only a sophomore.
Correct.
And he was one of the starting outside corner.
And Derek Williams. Correct. All I am saying is, Joe, you can't have a secondary that was 113th in the country and tell me that you don't have to take a massive step forward. Don't you dare come in here and tell me a team that had literally, Joe, think about this. LSU gave up 1 yard more through the air last year than Texas did.
Okay, but I just think.
You hear what I just said?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did.
1 more yard. So do you remember how ass that secondary was a year ago?
Yeah, it was terrible.
Do you remember what Jackson Dart did to that secondary a year ago?
Yeah, I do.
Imagine that same exact secondary, Jackson Darnold doing that to Texas.
This statement applies to LSU too. When you have the caliber of recruits on your roster, I'll look full circle. We were talking about that at the beginning of the show. When you have those caliber of the recruits on your roster,
LSU didn't have that caliber of guys on the roster.
Can improve. Didn't LSU have some young guys that weren't ready to get on the field?
Yeah, but young, undeveloped, under-recruited dudes.
But so the point is that when you've got some young players, there is plenty of potential for
fair. I think Derek Williams and Muhammad could really be good. It doesn't stop what Washington, as an example, did to them on the boundary over and over and over and over and over again. I'm old enough to remember when we broke down Texas and Washington, all the Texas fans told me, what did every comment from a Texas fan read that week? Blake's an idiot. Our secondary's good. Blake's an idiot. Our secondary's good. Okay, you do have talent, but my point still stands.
It's a different season.
Okay. And Joe, what do we talk? We go based off of what happened last year. If you had a unit that was one of the worst in the country, you cannot tell me that you go into another season saying, well, you know what? We can't just say, hey, they had talented guys. Oh, so it's going to be better. You can't do that. You got to show me that they're going to be better, and that is
why can't I do that? If you have the guys that were too young and inexperienced and made a bunch of mistakes last year and weren't ready for the circumstance and the situation, and not to mention the fact they went and added a veteran at free safety in Makuba. Makuba's a great player. He was one of the highly sought after players in the.
Let me give you an example by your logic. Do you also know who had a passing game to the equivalent of Texas's passing defense? Iowa.
Iowa does not recruit the kids at receiver that are comparable to the corners that are on this Texas team. That's not a good example.
When you have a unit that is in the 115 to 120 mark, and Joe, you are a Power 5 program, that's not always a talent issue. That might be a philosophical issue, a schematical issue by a DC. It doesn't matter how talented Derek Williams is. You know who went up in there and smacked that ass all for 4 quarters? Kalen DeBoer was scheming dudes wide ass open. So again, I would just say you got to show me when that secondary has been that bad the last 2 seasons, Joe. They have not had a secondary under Sarkisian that's been above the 90 mark ever. So it's going to continue to be a big issue. Joe, you want to know why they had a lot of success last year too? That secondary was anemic. That secondary was broken. Yes, they had a lot of young players. It didn't stop the fact that they had one of the best front sevens in the country. And now you have to replace that front seven.
Not the whole front seven.
Not the whole front seven, but two big interior pieces. So, Joe, imagine not getting the pass rush that you have with the secondary that you had a year ago that's got to be better.
I can't agree with this. I can't find a middle ground here on the expectation that their defense their secondary isn't going to be better.
Again, let me make it clear. I am not saying that they can't improve, but you can't tell me with teams like LSU that's in the conference, teams like Alabama offensively that are in the conference. Oh, they have units that are really bad, but it only matters, okay, when we want it to matter. We question LSU secondary when we talk about them every year. We are going to question what Alabama can do at wide receiver, right? Like, when you have units that are really bad a year before and you have question marks, yes, Joe, they have to answer question marks in the secondary for me. That's all I'm saying.
Sure. But I also used this same exact argument when we did the Alabama preview. I made the same exact argument that there are guys that were recruited that were high-level recruits that didn't get a lot of touches, didn't get a lot of opportunities, but there's plenty of room for growth. This is a whole off season. They've been hitting the weight room. They've been practicing during spring ball. There is plenty of potential for them to improve. Could they fall flat on their face again? Sure, they totally could. But we're not talking about a group that had
what do you think they're
juniors. Wait, we're not talking about a group that had a bunch of juniors that all came back and they didn't bring anybody into the room. We're talking about a group of guys where there's 2 sophomores stepping up, and they brought in a senior transfer from Clemson that was one of the best safeties in the transfer portal. There's room for improvement.
So what do you think they're going?
What do you mean? What do I think?
What's their record?
I think they're going to be 10-2. I think they're going to drop a stupid game. But 10-2 kind of requires a lot of, everything goes perfectly because they have an easier schedule compared to some other teams. But that would assume that they don't pull a, you mentioned the Houston game. They didn't play well against Rice. Like, they need to be on their P's and Q's. They also play Michigan. Like, they can't be playing sloppy.
I mean, you're at the big house. I'm actually going to give them a win there, but it's still a big game. Joe, you lost to Oklahoma a year before. And by the way, you got Oklahoma, Georgia, back-to-back. Back-to-back. So I know down the stretch it gets easier after the Georgia game, Vandy, Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, Texas A&M. Like, I get all that. Joe, I could see 3 losses on this team on this schedule.
If it is a disastrous no, I don't want to say that. If things don't go according to plan, and the questions that we're bringing up here, if receiver isn't as good as it could be, if defensive tackle in the interior is not up to par of what they need, and sure, I'll throw in your question of if the secondary doesn't improve, that to me is a 9-3 season.
I do think they beat Oklahoma. I think they lose to Georgia, but I look at Kentucky and A&M at the end there. That's going to be
at A&M is going to be tough.
At A&M is going to be tough, but Kentucky's going to be a very physical football game.
They're going to beat Kentucky.
I don't know if they. I'm not saying they won't.
Okay.
All right. Those are 3. By the way, you think they go to Michigan and win?
Yeah, I think that. I think that at the end of the day, that them having Ewers and the uncertainty of Orgy is going to hurt Michigan in that game.
The uncertainty if they're going to have an orgy.
End the show.
All right.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, it's what you said. The uncertainty of having an orgy.
Sure.
All right. So Texas and so Notre Dame and LSU tomorrow.
I think so. I think that'll be.
Did we miss anything, by the way? Like
news,
realignment portal?
No, not really.
Yeah. Okay. Other than Greg Sankey coming out again and saying,
I'm not gonna do it. I'm not taking the bait.
I'm telling Sankey's talking that shit.
The minute I'd be willing to bet the minute that contract comes up and there's so much uncertainty, his tune is going to change so quickly.
All right. Let's see you tomorrow, man. Peace.